Welcome to my channel. I'm Masood Raja, and on this channel I introduce you to books from all over the world. Today I'll be talking about a really special book, actually the first African novel ever to be published in English, and that is Amos Tutuola's The Palm Wine Drinkard. Let me repeat it again, Amos Tutuola's The Palm Wine Drinkard. Okay. This novel was published in 1953. Most of the times when we talk about the African novel in English, anyone you ask them, at least in the United States, and they would name Things Fall Apart. Remember, Things Fall Apart was published in 1958. So Tutuola's novel, The Palm Wine Drinkard, precedes that novel, but it also precedes the technique of Things Fall Apart, right? Things Fall Apart, in my opinion, became prominent because it told the story, a compelling story of an African character, and it was a character-driven novel, right? What Amos Tutuola does, first of all, he doesn't use standard English. So as you read it, it's kind of a jarring experience because you feel like, oh, maybe this is not an intelligent voice. But that's the beauty of the novel. It uses the language that anyone to whom English is not the first language that they have learned in school would use to tell the stories of what? Of Yoruba culture, right? So the basic gimmick, the opening lines of the novel is that our main character, who also occasionally calls himself a god who can do anything, has just lost his palm wine tapster. And by that what you mean is that the person who climbs up a pine tree and taps it so that you can collect the sap, and that becomes the palm wine, right? So our protagonist has lost his tapster, who's died, so he goes on his journey, on this quest to find his tapster from the realm of the dead and resurrect him so that he can have access to his palm wine, right? That's the narrative. That's the quest. Now, what happens on that quest is what makes this novel an amazing novel, because we encounter all these imaginative realms, right, which he has to pass through. So many quests that he is assigned to, because he goes into a village and says, can you tell me where I can find my tapster? And the village elders would say, yes, we will, if you go and find death for us. So that sends him on one quest and another quest. And in every quest, we meet creatures, living and dead things, that if you have only read American or Western fiction, for you will be one of the most fantastical experiences, okay? And then you will learn, whether he succeeds or not at the end, but it's a quest story that relies on Yoruba tales. And the novel got noticed when it came out, but the reviews were kind of highly racialized, right? These were like paternalistic views from European critics and writers. For example, Dylan Thomas, the poet, writes, "This is the brief, strong, grisly, and bewitching story written in young English by a West African about the journey of an expert and devoted palm wine drinker through a nightmare of indescribable adventures. From the age of 10, he drank 225 kegs a day and wished to do nothing else. It is hard and haunted going until the Drinkard and his wife reach Dadstown, meet the tapster, and clutching his gift of a miraculous, all-providing egg, are hounded out of the town by dead babies." Now, of course, this is a really interesting take on the novel, and it introduces the novel, but it is in young English, right? Because the English is not the standard English. Now, we've reached a stage in literary production where no one really cares how you employ English. there is a standard English. Some people are for it. People want their kids to learn it. But we already know that the standard, as established, as perpetuated, it's also at the mercy of the dominant group. What they consider is the standard, and then we go and we tweak the language, the metaphor, the similes, the storytelling traditions according to our own cultural assumptions, according to what we privilege. That's the kind of world in which we live. So sadly, I think the novel was slightly earlier than its time, because instead of reading it as rendering in English of traditional Yoruba folk tales in a language that our narrator would speak if he had learned it until 5th grade British school, right? In Lagos. So maybe then people would have read it differently. So I thought I should introduce you to this novel. I'm not going to delve into what happens. The plot is pretty simple. It's set up in the very beginning. Our narrator has lost his palm wine tapster. He drinks enormous amounts of palm wine, so he goes to seek his dead tapster to literally retrieve him from the world of the dead, which we know from Greek tragedy as well, who goes into the Hades to recover his or her friend, right? And so that's the kind of story it is. It is a quest story, but it's also magical and at times frightening. So I highly recommend it, and I hope you will read it and then let me know what you think about it. So I thought before I leave you, I should give you a brief sample of the kind of language he employs and the kind of world that he creates here. So I'm just reading at a random page, and this is his description of the experience. Then we took our fear back from the borrower, and he paid us the last interest on it. Then we found the one who had bought our death and told him to bring it, but he told us that he could not return it again because he bought it from us and had paid for it already. So we left our death for the buyer, so we took only our fear. So, it's just a brief thing, but it gives you an idea of the complexity in a novel that most people probably read as simple. Now, at the end of this edition, there is a brief note by Amos Tutuola himself, and he tells his life story that he grew up. He lived in a village. He didn't have enough money to go get an education. His parents sent him to an uncle, and he worked as a house servant, but the uncle paid for his education, which was interrupted, and he only could get up to a 5th grade education, and then he got enrolled in the Royal Africa Corps. And after 1945 is when he got, like all the other African soldiers, he was sent out of the military, and then he made his living as a coppersmith off and on. So that is his life story as a worker, but also as someone who wrote this novel and a couple of others. So I hope you enjoy reading it, and I hope it means something to you like it does to me. That's all. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Thank you so much, and as always, peace and love.